My name is Deirdre Lynch and I am a statistician in the CSO Census division. Today I will present the latest publication from Census 2022 results. The topics I will cover in this presentation include the Irish language and Gaeltacht, education level and economic status, and third level education. This presentation gives a brief oversight as to what's available in the full publication, so go to cso.ie for more details, visualizations, additional tables, and to explore the data in more detail. To begin, I will start with the Irish language and the Gaeltacht in Census 2022. For Irish speakers, we look only at those aged 3 years and above. If we look at the graph, we can see that yellow representing 2022, Irish speakers and non-Irish speakers have both increased since Census 2016. In Census 2022, there were 1.87 million Irish speakers. This was 40% of the population aged 3 years and over. This was an increase of 6% compared with 2016 results, which was an additional 112,000 people who could speak Irish. There were over 6,500 Irish language census forms completed in Census 2022. The question on the Irish language was expanded in 2022. This captured what level people spoke Irish at, which was very well, well, or not well. This slide includes data for those who were 3 years and above and indicated they spoke Irish. Of those who could speak Irish, 10% declared they spoke it very well, 32% indicated they spoke it well, and over half of the people who could speak Irish indicated they didn't speak Irish well. Census 2022 enabled us to look at the level of Irish and the frequency it was spoken. In general, among those aged 3 years and over who spoke Irish, people who spoke the language more frequently tended to speak it more fluently. 90% of people who spoke Irish daily outside the education system declared that they spoke it well or very well. Of those who spoke the language less often than weekly outside the education system, 62% said they didn't speak it well. 84% of those who never spoke Irish outside the education system indicated that they did not speak it well. We will now move on to the Gaeltacht areas in Census 2022. Looking at the population for all ages, there were 106,200 people in the Gaeltacht areas in 2022. This was 6,600 more people compared with 2016, an increase of 7%. However, it was only a 5% increase compared with Census 2011. This is because there was a slight decline in the Gaeltacht population between 2011 and 2016. All 8 Gaeltacht areas saw a population increase in the 6 years to 2022. The largest increase was in Waterford with 250 additional people, or a 14% increase. We can now look at Irish speakers in the Gaeltacht areas in Census 2022. There were 103,000 people aged 3 years and over in the census areas. 65,200 of these indicated they could speak Irish. This was an increase of 1,500 Irish speakers on the 2016 figure, so an increase of 2%. However, the proportion who could speak Irish in the Gaeltacht areas fell from 69% in 2011 to 66% in 2022. The Mayo and Donegal Gaeltacht areas seen the largest falls in the number of people who could speak Irish in the 6 years up to 2022. We will now go on to look at the level of education and economic status in Census 2022. Firstly, we will look at the highest level of education over the time period of 1991 to 2022. Over time, we can see the educational attainment of people aged 15 years and over has improved steadily. There was a decrease in the number of people who were educated to a primary level only. There was an increase in the number of those with higher levels of education. The greatest gains were in third level qualifications, rising from 14% in 1991 to 48% in 2022. The opposite trend occurred among those who had no formal education or primary education only. In 1991, 34% were not educated higher than primary school level, while the equivalent percentage in 2022 was only 11%. Census 2022 captured all education levels. In this slide, we look specifically at people who declared their education had ceased and their highest level of education was either no formal education or primary education. This group accounted for 10% of people aged 15 years and above. This was down from 12% in 2016. Nearly 1/4 of these indicated that they had no formal education, or 81,300 people. Under 11,000 people with no formal or primary education only were aged between 15 and 29 years. Most of this group were males. We will now look at the level of education by age. The graph here presents the data on the different age groups by their highest level of education attained. The general trend found that the younger people who had completed their full-time education were better educated than older people. Looking specifically at those whose highest level of education attained was third level, 58% of people aged 15 to 44 had a third level qualification in comparison with only 22% of those aged 65 years and over. The proportion educated to primary level only for those aged 65 and over was 28%. This was the case for just 3% of people aged between 15 and 44. We can look now at early school leavers. For this analysis, these include only people who ceased their education before the age of 16 years. These accounted for 8%, so 269,800 people completed their full-time education before the age of 16 in 2022. This was down from 13% in 2011 and 10% in 2016. Of these early school leavers in Census 2022, 184,000 people, or 68%, were aged 60 years and over. In 2016, 62% of school leavers were aged 60 years and over. And in 2011, this was 55% in the same age group. So it would appear the number of early school leavers decreased since 2011 and is increasingly confined to the older age cohorts. In 2022, almost 57% of early school leavers were male. We will now look at the different education levels and the industries worked in. Here we look at those working and aged 15 years and over and who ceased their education. We look specifically at the highest level of education for primary or lower, upper secondary and third level education. Agriculture, forestry and fishing was the industry sector with the highest percentage educated to a primary level or lower at 13%. Wholesale and retail trade sector had the highest percentage of workers with an upper secondary education at 41%. This was followed by accommodation and food services at 40%. 84% of information and communication activities had third level degree. This was followed by education with 82% and financial and insurance activities with 81%. 55% of all people working indicated they were educated to at least a third level degree. In 2016, this was 48%. This slide presents data for the highest level of education for males and females aged 15 years and over from the years 1991 to 2022. We can see the improvement in educational attainment was more pronounced among women. In 1991, we can see that 14% of males and 13% of females were educated to third level. By 2022, 50% of women were educated to third level, compared with 46% of men. From 2002, the number of women who have attained a third level degree has been higher than it was for males. More than 38,200 people had a doctorate. This was a 33% increase since 2016 and a 74% increase since 2011. There were more men than women that had a PhD at 53%. However, the gap has narrowed since 2011 when men represented 59% of PhD holders. There were 821 PhD holders who were either unemployed or looking for their first job. This gives us an unemployment rate of 3%. Of the PhD holders at work, over 1/3 worked in higher education, such as university professors and teachers, which was over 10,500 people. Over 77,000 people aged 15 years and over came to live in the state in the year leading up to Census 2022. This was a 7% increase compared with the same period leading up to Census 2016. Of these, 47,500 ceased their education. 1/3 were Irish citizens, of whom 75% had a third level education. Of the non-Irish citizens, 67% had a third level qualification or higher. This was over 21,000 people. The highest number and proportion of non-Irish citizens who moved to Ireland in the year leading up to the Census 2022 with a third level degree was for Indian citizens at 88%. The next highest groups were American citizens at 86% and French citizens at 84%. I will now finish up with the infographic for the Irish language and education profile. You can find this along with other infographics on cso.ie. Any queries you may have can be emailed to census@cso.ie. Thank you for your time.